Hey there BPB readers, today we're reviewing the MicroBrute, Arturia's ultra-compact analog hardware synthesizer that shares quite a few similarities with its big brother MiniBrute, but still brings some completely new features to the table. Good things come in small packages, goes the old saying, which is why we were quite eager to run this little synthesizer through its paces to try to find out how much synthesis power is packed in such a miniature instrument. For the retail price of around 250 quid, this small-scale noisemaker seems like a total steal on paper, considering that it's a 100% analog synthesizer with a whole bunch of knobs and sliders on the front panel and quite a few connectivity options on the back. But first things first, let's unbox this nice looking package and see what's hidden inside. The box contains the following items: a power cable for connecting the external DC unit to the power outlet, a pair of mini patch cables, which are meant for use with the instrument's modulation matrix, a DC unit that has an additional cord, making the total length of the power cable somewhere around 3 meters. Then there's the MicroBrute itself, of course. We'll take a closer look at it later in this video, but the initial impression is that it looks fantastic and feels really sturdy. And finally, you get a nicely written user guide and a handy patch notebook for writing down your favorite settings. A USB cable is not included. MicroBrute's keyboard features 25 miniature synth action keys, which do feel a bit spongy, but they're definitely comfortable enough for normal use, considering the synthesizer's compact size. While the MicroBrute itself does not respond to note velocity, the keys are actually velocity sensitive and will transmit velocity data via MIDI. The keyboard's range is controlled using the octave up and down buttons, located in the upper right corner of the front panel. The current state is indicated by the 5 color-coded LED diodes, making it rather easy to adjust the keyboard's octave setting in low-light situations. The pitch and modulation wheels are positioned right above the keyboard on the left. While this kind of layout would not be ideal on a larger keyboard, it perfectly suits MicroBrute's small size. Both wheels feel very smooth and precise, without any sort of wobbliness or other nasty defects that are often found on cheaper keyboard models. The pitch wheel is hardwired to oscillator pitch, and the modulation wheel can be used to control either the LFO amount or the filter's cutoff frequency. The back panel is where you'll find all of the available inputs and outputs, along with some additional controls. Going from left to right, there's the retractable fine-tune control, CV gate inputs and outputs, a 1/4-inch mono line output, a standard headphone jack, an audio input jack with a retractable input level control knob, a USB port, DC input, and finally the on-off switch. Phew. Looking at the front panel, the initial impression is that the MicroBrute features a fairly standard control layout for a subtractive synthesizer. You get the oscillator controls in the upper left corner, a multi-mode filter section in the center, and the modulation matrix on the right, with the master volume control right below it. The second row sports the portamento knob and the modulation wheel assignment switch, the LFO section, a single ADSR envelope, and the built-in sequencer with 8 pattern memory slots. Taking a closer look at the available controls though, quite a few things stand out when comparing the MicroBrute to other synthesizers on the market. To begin with, the oscillator section packs some pretty unique features, such as the overtone sub waveform, which can morph between a standard sub and a fifth, or the saw waveform, which can be animated using the hypersaw parameter. The hypersaw effect is fairly subtle, but it actually sounds quite interesting, especially when layered on top of other waveforms. But most importantly, there is the triangle waveform with its metal parameter, which transforms it into this really awesome noisy timbre that can be used to generate all sorts of aggressive and harsh sounds. Layered on top of other waveforms, it works as a rather splendid alternative to a noise oscillator. Okay, enough talk for now, let's take a listen to the oscillator. Onto the filter section. The MicroBrute uses the same Steiner-Parker multi-mode filter that was used in its bigger brother, the MiniBrute, minus the notch pass filter mode and the contour speed setting. In terms of MicroBrute's sound, this is where the magic happens. The filter sounds quite round and creamy when set to a low resonance, with very pleasant sounding overdrive when the oscillator volume is increased past 50%. As you push the resonance closer to its maximum value, the filter starts to scream and roar in all sorts of ways, as if it wants to let you know what sort of beast the MicroBrute actually is. The so-called brute factor parameter, which is essentially a feedback circuit, makes things even more interesting and unpredictable at higher resonance settings, adding a layer of distortion and almost bit-crush sound quality to the mix. So without further ado, let's hear this fantastic filter in action. Please beware, high resonance ahead. MicroBrute's mod matrix is where you can override the default modulation setup and use the LFO and ADSR envelope to modulate the filter's cutoff frequency, triangle waves metallizer effect, and pulse waves pulse width. Out of the box, the patching options are somewhat limited since you only get 2 patch cables, meaning that it is not possible to connect one modulation source to 2 different destinations. Purchase a couple of cheap mini jack to RCA converters though, and you can make multiple connections from a single modulation source all day long, as you can see in our video. It is also worth noting that the original MicroBrute has a posh sibling called MicroBrute SE, which actually includes stackable patch cables in the box, along with several different color schemes and a really neat gig bag. Anyways, here's a quick look at MicroBrute's mod matrix and some of the stuff you can do with it. The last feature that we'll highlight in this review is the step sequencer, which is actually one of our favourite parts of MicroBrute. The sequencer is incredibly easy to program, and a whole lot of fun to use. Its internal memory can be used to store 8 custom sequences, with up to 64 steps per sequence. The sequences remain saved even after the device is switched off. To create a new sequence, simply enter record mode and input the notes using the keyboard, while adding rests using the dedicated button on the sequencer panel. The sequencer can be fine-tuned using the free MicroBrute software editor, which makes it possible to select different play modes and note lengths, or even to back up your sequences for later use. Here's a quick look at the sequencer in action. And finally, before we reach the conclusion, here's a really quick look at some of the patches that we made while testing the MicroBrute, just to give you a basic idea of what can be done with this amazing little synth. As you've probably already figured out, we really enjoyed testing this little synth. Arturia has done something amazing with MicroBrute, making a completely original analog synthesizer that has all the prerequisites to be considered a classic piece of music-making hardware in the decades to come. Due to its fantastic sound and superb portability, this little synthesizer is equally suitable for use in a studio, on stage, or pretty much any place with access to a power socket really. And with it being so small and so much fun to use, we can't help but notice that the MicroBrute is almost like some sort of tiny droid that will follow you around anywhere you go and make all sorts of weird sounds in the process. Sounds familiar? Thanks for watching our video review of the Arturia MicroBrute. For a more in-depth look at this fantastic synthesizer, visit the reviews section of our website at bedroomproducersblog.com. Click the thumbs up button below if you liked the video, and please feel free to leave a comment letting us know which gear you'd like to see featured in our future video reviews. Peace.